I don't really know how I follow you after that. I wasn't expecting. Well, I think I'm going to start off actually with the story of how I met him. And it was actually quite an interesting one. So I'd just done a TEDx talk in Brighton, and usually you expect to see some people sort of afterwards, but I was a good sort of, we'd gone for drinks afterwards, and then on the train home, I heard Tim and his daughter behind talking about the event and talking about the day, and I turned around, and I think it took you a couple of seconds to realise who I was, and we then exchanged details, and he wanted me to come along here tonight to talk a bit about Gen Z. So to start off with, I'm going to talk about who I am. So this is me. I would like to say probably in a more attractive stance. I think it's gone down in a couple of years. I'm 18 years old, and I am mostly well known for starting my first company when I was 13. So now I'm 18, so I'm 5 years later now, which is a bit weird. When you think about it, I've been in business. I've been doing business now for 5 years, and it's very different. And what I did with that business is I grew a team of 40, and I'm no longer involved in that business, and I exited it in 2017. And I basically built content in. How many of you have heard of Minecraft? Yeah. So I'm a very old school Minecrafter. I played Minecraft pretty much since it came out, all through sort of my childhood and all that. And what we did with Minecraft is we built stuff and content within Minecraft. So believe it or not, I had about a team of 40 people sort of all around the globe that would build stuff in Minecraft all day for their jobs. So for those of you that think that video games are just video games, those people were on stupidly high salaries, which cost me a fortune every month, and all they did all day was place blocks. So I built sort of a company out of that, the first of its type sort of in the world, and we went on and we produced live content. We used to produce a show that was watched by about 1 million people a night, all sort of from my bedroom in Eastbourne. So we used to do kind of amazing things, but in small places, and I think it always taught me that you don't need a big fancy office and a big sort of fancy area to do what you need to do. And I then moved over to sort of consultancy and strategy. So what most people do after they run sort of a big company like that is they like to give back and give their advice before their sort of next idea and their next concept come to life. Now I'm in the phase at the moment where my next concept and my next idea hasn't quite come to light yet, and so now I do consultancy and strategy, and I specialise in work mainly with sort of large billion-dollar companies. So I've kind of found my little niche, and I do lots and lots of little day jobs and work, and I get to know all the cool updates, what the new phones look like before they come out and things like that. And I really get to travel around and do talks like this inside companies and talks like this sort of around everywhere. And I also do event production, so on a large scale. So I'm currently working on an event series at the UN in New York City, which is going to be coming to light hopefully next year. And if you told me sort of 5 years ago when I was first starting out in business that I'd be doing this sort of 5 years later, I definitely wouldn't believe you. I mean, I've got a couple of my friends here that have known me for years and years and years, and I would say I was a very, very different person a long, long time ago. But anyway, we're going to talk a bit more now about what sort of Gen Z is. So how many of you have heard of the phrase Generation Z before?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah? So the way I sort of describe Gen Z is it's mainly sort of young people that are born between 1995 and 2010. So sort of prior to Gen Z, you had millennials, or Gen Y, and then after Gen Z, which you have, which were born after Gen, in 2010 onwards, they're called Generation Alpha. So we're kind of going back down to the top of the internet again. And believe it or not, which maybe you could have guessed, Gen Z is me. So I'm really honestly, I got really bored. I like to do cool animations. So I'm Generation Z, and I'm gonna hopefully tell you a bit about us. So as you might know, we're all very lazy. We don't want to work. We're addicted to social media, and we expect everything to be handed to us. We don't want to learn, and we drink excessively. I mean, I've got my gin tonight already, and we have no work ethic whatsoever. And we think everything's too much effort, and we do lots and lots of drugs. I mean, lots and lots of drugs. This is what you find if you search up drugs on the internet. Not that I do often, but basically we're terrible people. I'm guessing looking at lots of you, you might have people that you know, that you work with that are a Gen Z, or sons and daughters, and similar. And I'd hope that you realise that that's all rubbish. And we're actually very, very different. And Gen Z is a lot larger than what most people realise. So the UN's reported that we're going to make up about 32% of the population this year, or hitting on to 33. So that means 1 in 3 people in the world will be in Generation Z. So if you didn't know what Generation Z was, you might want to start taking notice now, because they're very soon going to outnumber you all. And we're the largest, as you can probably guess, we're the largest generation ever. Millennials used to be the largest generation, single generation, and we are very quickly sort of overtaken that. We have the largest consumer power, which in my line of work means quite a lot, and that's only going to expand and grow. And we have the largest influence as well on sort of big issues going forward in the future. We're also the most diverse group. So a cool statistic I'd like to share is that next year in America, 50% of Gen Z will be white and 50% won't be. And that's quite a big figure for America, who's very sort of, particularly at the moment, they're going through quite a national sort of caring about anti-immigrant and things like that, when in reality, 50% of their young generation next year is going to be non-white, which is a huge shift and a huge change, and we're going to lead that. And we're also a very global generation. I mean, I'm assuming you've all heard of this thing called the internet, which we basically live on nowadays, and it's very, very different when you grow up with the internet than if you learn the internet later on. And that's what the next line is about. And fundamentally, the internet is us. And this is kind of a statistic that will probably blow your mind, but we spend sort of 10.6 hours a day just on the internet. And considering lots and lots of Gen Z are in school at the moment as well, so they have full-time education and they sleep half the night, it pretty much occupies the rest of their time. And we constantly know what's going on everywhere. So I mean, nowadays, in my example, we sort of get our information from multiple sources, and we use, oddly, on average, we use 1.8 screens to consume it. So when we're sat at home, we're using mobile phones or computers at the same time, and we're using on average nearly 2 screens at once. We're also the most connected. So when I was starting my first company, the 40 people in my team, only about 3 of them were in the UK, and the rest were abroad. And believe me, for any of you that might be accountants or deal with money or payrolls, trying to do payrolls in 13 different countries at once was an absolute pain. But we were able to communicate online and through Skype, and our average age was 16, the people we had there. So these were all really young and exciting and influential people. And we fundamentally consume information very differently. You might notice that we consume it a lot quicker as well, so we'll be able to pick up skills and pick up information a lot quicker than generations before, and that's very exciting for me. We also understand really what's going on. And we're going to cover a bit more about that a bit later on when I talk about what we do in marketing. And we use social media like it's anything else. We value independence and collaboration, and we won't take no, and we'll find out how. I think a prime example of seeing this at the moment is the marches that have been going on recently around climate change. The biggest climate change marches that the world's ever seen are happening, and they're led by young people and Gen Z at the moment, which gets me really, really excited for the future. We also have a very, very short attention span. I mean, very, very short. I mean, I sometimes literally, I don't even watch television anymore because I hate the ad breaks. They don't keep me interested. But we can multitask way better than all of you. We hate sort of bureaucratic systems, which is interesting, which we're going to touch on a bit later. It's about our workplace. And we fundamentally just want to get on with it. And we're going to start to see this attitude is going to change and move throughout. We have very high expectations of the world we live in, and we have values and high awareness of what's going on. And in marketing, we very much see through sort of crappy advertising, and there's a big expectation in what we do that we won't change, but we'll change the world. And I very much believe that. And something I constantly have to remind people, on a regular basis, believe it or not, is that we're not millennials. There's such a big misconception between millennials and Gen Z, and they're so often grouped together, but the differences between them are so fundamentally different that it kind of angers me when I walk into meetings with people and they're like, oh yeah, like millennials. No, we're not like millennials. And the truth about the generation is generally what I do in my work. So I try and get companies and people, usually people that are large figures in companies who don't really understand young people, to understand, how to do them better. So in marketing, I do that marketing and human resources, So marketing, the main way to do that is through using influencers. So have you all heard of influencer marketing? Yeah? So influencer marketing is using the power of what other people think to influence your decision of buying. So I'm looking at this study called John, and John, we're seeing a complete change from influencer marketing, which worked on millennials, to the influencer marketing that works on Gen Z. And John, for example, posts 8 posts in the past year about visiting different hotels. He has like 100,000 followers on social media. But what we're seeing now is that John's posts aren't as valuable as what we call micro-influencers, which are people that can have sort of 5 to 30,000 followers, really small. And they're what Gen Z are really sort of starting to not only make themselves, so become micro-influencers in that market, but also use to do that. And then when we're hiring young people, which lots of my work I do, is around how to hire them, a huge shift that we've seen sort of in the generation, and studies have shown, and we haven't seen this, and we're not going to see this for another 20 or 30 years because of how young we are, is that we won't work in the same place forever. So rather than having big, long 40-year careers, we're going to have a lot shorter careers. And that, when hiring people and building different companies, is going to be very different. And fundamentally, I think we're going to see huge shifts in how we educate people, and how we educate Generation Alpha and eventually Generation Beta, and how they grow up. And we take a lot more pride in our careers and what we do. Now, to finish off, I want to talk quickly about a project that I do, which is called the ZX Spectrum. How many of you know the ZX Spectrum? So we've got a couple of people, probably people that used to use it. So it used to be an old piece of technology. And what we do is a podcast series that I do online with a woman called Lizzie Hodgson. And I'm Generation Z, and she's Generation X. And we talk about the differences in the generations. And what I'd like to encourage you all to do today is actually, I'd love to have conversations with as many of you as possible. So please come over and chat about the differences between your generation and our generation and things like that. And yeah, that's me done. That's me, thank you.
Yes.
And yeah, thank you for having me.